Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest introduced to you now. Harmony Bright began experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia in adolescence and was officially diagnosed at 32. However, she has spent the last 4 years transforming her mental and physical health. After losing 137 pounds, wow, through a low carbohydrate diet with exercise and intermittent fasting, Harmony discovered that being in ketosis also helped alleviate symptoms of her schizophrenia. Now 48 and a proud mother of two, she's passionate about raising awareness of metabolic therapies that she believes are safer and more effective than drug only treatments. Beyond her health journey, she enjoys home improvement projects and gardening, thriving on turning visions into reality and helping others transform their spaces. Harmony is courageously sharing her story on social media, both on Instagram and Twitter, as she describes her journey of trying to improve her health and heal her schizophrenia through a ketogenic diet. She acknowledges that her story isn't over yet, but as many people in her life tell her that she is now unrecognizable after taking her health into her own hands, Harmony is striving to inspire others through her own journey. You can find Harmony on Twitter or X at Harmony Bright. Harmony Bright, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey. Thanks for having me.
It's such an honor to host you. Are you used to calling Twitter X now, or are you still calling it Twitter?
Both, because there's a lot of old school people.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still not in the habit of saying X. I need to remember to do that since that's the official name. Do you get compliments on your name all the time? It's such a lovely name.
Yeah, I do. My father actually named me, and he had schizophrenia as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Harmony Bright is a great name. It fits your personality. I see you posting pictures all the time on Twitter and sharing your story all the time. And like we were talking about offline, I only know this version of Harmony. Your pinned post on Twitter is just so striking to see these two completely different individuals and thinking back and knowing that that was you at one point and all the things you've suffered from and struggled through. It's just so hard to imagine that it's not the same happy, smiley, physically fit, capable woman that I'm used to seeing. That you had just an incredible journey through health. Do you ever like have to pinch yourself and think back on what must feel like at this point, like a completely different life?
Yeah, humbling.
Yeah.
In 2020, I was losing my ability to stand. I had 2 discs replaced in my neck. I had cervical myelopathy. My legs felt heavy. I felt like, exercise obviously didn't come easy. It's humbling to be in a position where your antipsychotics are causing you to choke on every bite you take because of the drug-induced Parkinson's, and you're losing your ability to walk, and your resting heart rate is over 100, and your health is just in a downward spiral. It's humbling. I had 2 back-to-back surgeries in 2020 for the cervical myelopathy, the disc replacement. I had 2 discs replaced, and then I had knee surgery a month after that. And so between the cervical myelopathy and the torn meniscus and the loose body, the size of a peanut piece of cartilage just getting wedged in my knee, so I couldn't put pressure on it either. So between all of that going on, I felt like I was dying. I felt like, I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't eat. I couldn't poop. My intestines were terribly inflamed. Didn't know why all this was happening to me. It just felt like all my bodily functions that normal people do on a day-to-day basis, it felt like my whole body was failing.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, thank you for being so open and willing to have this conversation. I know it's not the easiest thing to talk about and revisit, and we'll definitely get into your story about how you even got to that place. I sit here and reflect how easy it could have been to go another direction. How many people find themselves in that type of a situation and feel so hopeless that they don't get themselves out of it. And it's absolutely tragic, not only for the person, but the families, the friends, the people affected by it. To know that there is an alternative to the medications out there, and there's this like emerging field of metabolic psychiatry is just it's such amazing, wonderful news that I don't think any of us are comfortable letting just kind of slide by without trying to share it far and wide to as many people as possible. And so I really respect you and the other people who have gone through insane amounts of suffering and come out the other end and wanted to share their journeys about that. So I have a lot of respect for you. And I think it's really telling of you and your character to say that that journey is humbling to you, and that it still makes you emotional to think back on. But let's get into a little bit of your history. We mentioned in the introduction that the signs and symptoms of schizophrenia had started in adolescence. Is that pretty normal for schizophrenia, or is that pretty early?
That's pretty early. I believe for males, it's usually like in your 18 to 20, early 20s. But I think females, it's slightly later, like probably like 5 years or something. My symptoms began early in adolescence, and it's probably because I had a hard home life. My father had schizophrenia his whole life that I've known him. And my parents divorced when I was a baby, and then my mom didn't want me. And so, I was a ward of the state. So, I didn't really have the support system I needed in my teenage years. And so, I started having cognitive problems in school, like learning became very hard and stuff like that. And what I've later learned is that that's one of the early signs of mental illness. Stuff just becomes harder because your brain isn't able to process the glucose and the carbs in your diet. So when you're feeding yourself this diet that isn't brain healthy, you're going to have all these difficulties, these cognitive difficulties in learning.
Yeah, for sure. How were you able to get through school that way? Like, did you graduate high school? Did you move on to college? Like, how were you able to manage that?
I graduated high school, probably barely, but and then I got I just I had started working at 14, but I just worked several jobs, and then I tried to go back to take some classes in college when I was in my 20s, and it just same deal as high school and middle school. It just was too hard. I remember being in a writing class, and they asked me to write a paragraph, and I was like, I can't do that. So when I talk about my physical symptoms being humbling, it's also humbling when your cognition just can't perform, and you just can't string together a few sentences that make sense.
That is incredibly challenging. Now, you said you were taken into custody by the state. Is that right? Did you have like a foster family that helped raise you?
Um, yeah, I had a legal guardian. She was also my sister's guardian. She was her Bible study teacher, and then she took me in too. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
I did have some support system.
Yeah. Definitely good that you had at least that. Obviously, a very challenging situation to grow up in. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about the physical symptoms as they were kind of coming along with the mental symptoms. What were you noticing as far as the physical changes?
The physical changes for
Like through your like when you were in your 20s, trying to take these classes, your mental state doesn't seem like it was improving that much. Yeah, what was happening physically as well?
So physically, in high school, I enjoyed running. I would run with my dogs at night and stuff, and I had all this energy. But as I got into my 20s, all this energy and stuff declined. It declined, and I would try to run, but I just didn't have the strength or the energy to do it. And I think that's just because my body didn't like what I was feeding it. in retrospect. But like I would try running in my 20s. I couldn't run, you know. I was like, what is happening to me? Like my body just is revolting and I just can't do everything like mentally or physically. I just have no stamina. My sleep is erratic, you know, I'm just struggling. And so I wasn't able to do running in my 20s or 30s or 40s. But you know, just last year when I was 47, I started running again after 30 years of trying and failing. So like this is 30 years. Like most people probably would give up and just be like, well, I guess I'm not gonna run. You know, but I just kept trying. And then eventually, you know, my diet got so freaking tight with the carbs. I was eating 20, at that point, I was eating 20 net carbs a day or less, trying not to go over that. And I saw a dramatic increase in my energy, my physical abilities, my arthritic knees that had loose pieces of cartilage breaking off. And you know, I didn't have the painful swollen knees and joints. And like in 2020, I couldn't even stand without like having like pain just standing. Like that's how much painful inflammation that was in my body. It was unbearable. And there is an association with schizophrenia and inflammation, neuro and physical. So like everything was just inflamed in me. And so I'm proud to say I can run as of last year. In fact, I can run several miles without stopping and having energy deficits or just not feeling like I can do this. So a lot has changed for the better.
That's amazing. Wow, that's so cool. You should be very, very proud to say that. Going back to your 20s and 30s, we mentioned that you're the mother of two kids, got married at some point. Like how did you meet your husband? When did you guys meet and get together?
So I was his waitress, and he left his number on the receipt, and I said, oh, I don't call people that leave their number on the receipt. They're usually just like, I don't know, just not something I would do. It's very out of character. But I asked my coworkers, I was like, what do you think of the guys at that table? Because one of them left their number. And he was like, oh, they seem nice and respectable. And so like I was like, okay, so I gave it a shot. And then we ended up married.
I love that. Yeah. When did you start having children?
I was in my early 20s when I started
Early
having
20s.
children. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. And you weren't diagnosed with schizophrenia until your early 30s, I believe, is what we read in the introduction. So what was that process like of starting a family, you know, the relationship with you and your husband when you're starting to experience more of the physical and mental kind of symptoms as time went on? How was that affecting some of those relationships, you know, with your husband, with your kids, inside your family?
It can be kind of hard. So like, I don't know if you know anything about schizophrenia, but there's like a prodromal phase where it's like it lasts several years before a full-blown psychosis episode takes place. And so you'll experience like loose symptoms here and there and you know, and things won't, I'll exhibit odd behaviors and things that are just like, yeah, you know, that's kind of weird or that's kind of different and stuff like that. And then what happens is you'll eventually, if you don't intervene and do something drastic like metabolic therapies or medication, you'll eventually experience your first psychotic break. And mine was in 2008. You know, basically I got involuntary hospitalized and put on meds. The meds sedated me very badly. I couldn't even keep my eyes open. So then I switched to the medication that I'm currently on right now that I'm trying to taper off of. It can be kind of hard raising a family with schizophrenia, you know, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I know that there were a lot of events and things like that that I missed out on over the years and stuff just because of my physical or mental health didn't allow me to do things. I was severely agoraphobic at a point in my life with my illness. And so like I even sought therapy because I couldn't leave the house. It just I just couldn't do it. My anxiety at one point was so bad I was popping 5 Xanax a day
Oh
just
my
to
goodness.
stay home, just to stay home. Because
Wow.
like I haven't worked in over 20 years because it would bring about a worsening of my mental health. I just couldn't handle it. So like the 5 Xanax a day, I was taking that just so like I could just do nothing, just be home. And I still had no peace. I had terrible anxiety with that. And I remember uh, just having a really hard time and tell my husband, sometimes that, like, could you come home and just be with me? I took the Xanax like I'm prescribed, but it's just not touching the symptoms of anxiety. And so like I just needed comfort, because like the meds didn't provide that. What's cool though is that, I struggled with agoraphobia, anxiety, and stuff like that. But so this past winter, I went to the gym and it was snowing, or it was going to start snowing pretty bad, and I was working out at the gym. And then by the time I left, the roads were completely covered. It's been so long since I drove in a snowstorm, probably decades, probably like 20 years to be honest. And because like I never felt like I could get through driving in a snowstorm, and because of my anxiety had been so terrible, even though I was medicated and treated. And I'm not on Xanax today. And I was able to navigate the snowstorm, and I was so proud of myself. I was so proud. I just was like, I even took the back roads, which, if it's a snowstorm, you take the main roads because
That's
they're
right.
clearer. But no, I took the back roads and I filmed, and I was like, look at this. Look at this. Look at what you're doing. You're not being controlled by your anxiety and your fears and your phobias. You're living again and stuff like that. And it just, I took the video. Some people online, I posted it. I was like, for safety reasons, you really shouldn't do that. But I needed to do that because like I needed to have that memory, because you got to think for 20 years, I couldn't experience that, and I don't know how much longer I've got on this earth. I want to be able to reflect back and be like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. What a cool story. I love that. I'm glad you glad you took that. As we're talking about, the diagnosis, did you feel how did you feel when you got the diagnosis? Was it a sense of relief in any way that you at least knew that this thing had a name? Or was it kind of disempowering?
Um, a little bit of both. A little bit of both. It was like, oh, so now I have what my father had, and then that brought about some sadness because I saw what kind of life he led, and the meds never really fully worked really well for him, so it kind of made me sad because like I was like, oh great, you know,
Yeah.
I know how his story ended.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
it wasn't, it's how a lot of people's mental health journeys are. It doesn't go quite well.
Yeah, definitely. And then it sounds like you went through the same carousel of all kinds of different prescription medications that a lot of people go through. I've heard you talk about this before, and many other people in this space. Like, not great to use the medications, but they do serve a purpose. They can help for certain situations. I know lots of people who felt like they were on the brink of suicidality and started taking some type of medication that at least got everything stabilized, which is great. And they do have their place, and you should work with medical professionals to be able to do that. And also remember that there are side effects. And a lot of people talk about weight gain being a big side effect on psychiatric drugs. Was that your experience as far as the weight gain happened? Was that directly related to the prescriptions from what you can tell?
Yeah, in high school, I was active. I was running in the evenings, with my dogs. I was playing tennis, I was playing volleyball, I was participating in sports and life. Um, I was thin, I wasn't skinny, but I was of normal BMI. And then when I started going on these psychiatric drugs in my 30s, I would gain like 100 pounds. And then I did the Jenny, I lost 80 pounds or something. And then I did gain it all back, of course, because that is not a sustainable diet. I was left feeling like, hungry and stuff. And so then I gained all that back and some. And then my weight ballooned up to 273 pounds. And then I was like, I was like, so basically I was in the hospital having those surgeries, and I was like, I just said a prayer. I was like, if I make it through these surgeries and I regain my function and ability to stand, I'm going to try my butt off. I'm going to try to get healthy. And so that led me on a journey of trying to find something that would work for my physical health ailments, which were numerous, and my mental health. I wasn't even thinking my mental health, because at this point I was like, I didn't know there was anything that would help it, because I was just doing the doctor's advice. Here's a pill for you, and it just, I had given up hope at that point for my mental health. So I was just like, well, if my physical health improves, God, I'm going to try to be able to stand and exercise and stuff. So little did I know that was a metabolic therapy that could also improve my schizophrenia.
Yeah, so fascinating. Okay, that's a good kind of segue. I wanted to talk about your journey again through your 30s and 40s. You mentioned Jenny Craig, and we're able to do that. Did you have any other kind of interest in nutrition at that time, or was Jenny Craig like the first time you'd ever like really thought about nutrition? Again, not for mental health, but at least for kind of like weight loss. Was that the first time you'd really like considered kind of nutrition?
Yeah, that was my first time. I wouldn't say that I was considering nutrition or looking into food, but I was just like desperate. I was like, I need something that's going to work, because obviously I don't want to be 100 pounds overweight and stuff like that, because I was 80 pounds overweight. And so I did that. But in 2020, I was like, I've never tried low carb, low sugar, so I'm going to give that a shot. And so I gave that a shot. And then I started learning about health and nutrition, because my husband kind of had a little problem with his COVID. And he started having some heart symptoms and some problems controlling his inflammation from that illness. And so then that sparked my curiosity, because I'm like, well, what is what does it mean to have an inflamed body? And then you look at all the things and factors that go into that, and so then I just started reading more and more, and it sparked more and more curiosity. So I was trying to understand how my body works and how his body works, and so then I just started researching, and I started researching pretty hardcore, and I found out a lot of good natural alternatives for things. And so I started trying to work on my inflamed gut and stuff like that, and learning about probiotics and bone broth and how to heal your gut, because my gut was inflamed. I've had probably poor nutrient absorption throughout the years from taking another pill like Prilosec or Nexium, and so that destroyed my gut health, which probably further worsened my schizophrenia, because if you are nutrient deficient of certain vitamins or nutrients, you're going to have mental health issues. You could possibly even have psychosis. And so like I did have some nutrient deficiencies, probably had more than the ones they taught, but I did have some. Like iron was a deficiency in me, and so was vitamin D. And if you're obese or insulin resistant, which a lot of psychiatric patients are, you're going to probably be deficient in vitamin D for sure.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's go back to 2020. What was it about low carbohydrate or cutting sugar that got your attention? Like why did you think that was going to work, especially after doing something like Jenny Craig, where it's like, you can lose a bunch of weight, 80 pounds you lost successfully until it wasn't successful, as we know, but you successfully lost 80 pounds by just reducing your calories. What was it about low carbohydrate that sounded good to you even before you started researching it? Like, was it intuitive to you, or like, what made you think that that might be a good idea?
Well, I had heard other people do a low carb diet. I had no idea what it was. And honestly, I was just trying to get rid of the processed crap that I was eating. And so, like, when doing that, I started eating more whole foods. And so that began like more of like a paleo kind of style diet where it's just whole foods and like low carb because you're getting rid of all the junk in the diet and stuff like that. I had no idea that it would, I was just trying to get healthier. I was just trying not to choke on every bite I took. I was just trying to clear my congestion that, like, because the antipsychotics can cause also nasal congestion. And so, like, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't swallow, I couldn't poop, I couldn't stand, I couldn't do anything. So I was just trying to find a healthier way to live. And I didn't know at that time when I first started that it would help me so much.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's a really good point. And I often wonder this, um, for people who don't have a background in nutrition and they just kind of like know what they're told at the grocery store, like, do you think you knew that most of the processed food, the packaged stuff, was inherently bad for you, or were there times when like, oh, this box of cereal says that it's healthy, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm following, the food guidelines or whatever? Did you kind of inherently know that processed food was not great for you and you should really switch over to whole food? Or is it kind of an ignorance, do you think, for like most people or yourself in your own journey of like, no, I think I'm doing the right thing by getting like, whole wheat bread, for example?
Oh yeah, yeah, like yeah, you think, oh yeah, what's the harm in a sandwich? I mean, everyone eats that, right? And stuff like that. But yeah, I would say that I I I probably was ignorant into how damaging those processed foods are with all the seed oils it contains, which are highly inflammatory in your body. I mean, and especially with schizophrenia, you have a lot of neuroinflammation or just systemic inflammation. Like in my case, everything was inflamed: my gallbladder, my intestines, my thyroid. I could only imagine what my neuroinflammation was like if all these other tests showed that kind of inflammation. And I could just see it invisibly, like my legs swelling and stuff like that. So yeah, I ignorantly thought, what's the harm in bread or pastas, or like, because like our dietary guidelines do not reflect what will help people.
Yep. Very true. Very true. Sad but true. Okay, so great move to switch over to a whole foods diet. It's a very kind of normal progression that I see with a lot of people where they are eating standard American diet. It's awful. They're suffering from all kinds of different things. Switch over to more whole foods. That's a great step, and it puts them on that kind of path that I see a lot of people do, where they, are the kind of that paleo style. Eventually, people kind of realize they can reduce their carbohydrates. Some might even get to a level of ketosis. And again, at this point of the story, you're doing all of this for your physical health, not necessarily for your mental health. But how did the journey go as far as the whole foods? Was it difficult to transition onto? And how quickly were you noticing results from that?
So basically in 21, basically, because like my surgeries happened at the end of 2020. So basically in 21, I started saying, I'm gonna try to move more, so like maybe stand or do stuff or, around the house more. and or walk around the block more, just try to move some, because I figured that would be a healthy lifestyle, for me to try to get back into moving more and stuff like that. The what was the question again, Casey?
Just basically like how it was going as you were transitioning more onto like whole foods, and how quickly were you noticing results?
So in 21, I started exercising more and started watching more of my diet and the whole foods and stuff like that. And I started probably seeing results by about 5 months in. I started experiencing symptoms of being over medicated on my antipsychotic for the first time at that point in 13 years. And nobody knew what was going on, because my psychiatrist had never seen me improve and need or necessitate a reduction in my meds. So I went from May of 21 all the way to Christmas time of that year. And I was like choking on my food more and more and more, because what it had happened is, when you're over medicated on your antipsychotics or your meds, you start experiencing drug potentiation and increased side effects. And the swallowing difficulties was a drug-induced form of Parkinson's. And so, like, I went to a neurologist probably that October, and they're like, "Oh, you need to talk to your psychiatrist. This is what's going on." And so I did, and she's like, "I don't feel comfortable reducing your meds." And so I was like, "Well, that's not going to work for me, because I don't want to aspirate to death, because I'm going to, because I can't drink fluids, I can't chew my food without choking." I was like, "This is not going to work." So, being the person that I am, and I started researching the medication I was on, and I was like, "Oh, so my medicine is supposed to be taken with food." And I said, "Oh, if I don't take it with food, what happens?" And so it reduces the strength by half. So that's what I did. I didn't take it with food. And then I waited till after the holidays, and then I started doing it December 26th, because I was like, I respect my family too much, because obviously when you play with mind altering drugs, you could have problems, and I didn't want to ruin the holidays. And so I waited till afterwards. I told my family what I was going to do, because my psychiatrist wasn't on board with helping me with the side effects, because we had previously tried to reduce my meds and that didn't go well. So so I started taking it without food, and then waited until my appointment, until I had been taking it without the food. So I decreased the dosage by half for a month. And then at my next appointment, I told my psychiatrist what I had done. And I was like, "Let's just make it legit. Give me a prescription for the new dosage that I obviously am safely tolerating." So I did that. And then that just trickled down to going from 60 milligrams of geodone until I reduced all the way down to 20. And at that point, going low carb, low sugar was enough. And it reduced me so significantly. And I had no symptoms of my illness, none whatsoever. But my doctor at that time did not feel comfortable taking her patient completely off the meds. I think I could have gone off them safely.
Wow, that's incredible. What an amazing story. As we go deeper into the story at this point, so what? We're in the winter of 2021, getting into 2022. How much weight did you lose by changing your diet?
Probably not a significant amount, but a decent amount. Like probably about half my weight.
Okay.
I would say probably about half of it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And then it's very interesting, your story, because there are a few things that I wouldn't have thought would work as well. in the order that they were put in. Like I typically want somebody to change their diet before I get them exercising or even thinking about increasing their movement. I want somebody to be eating the right foods before they consider things like fasting. And those are some of the tools you started using early, very early on, like exercising, moving, and also trying some intermittent fasting. So yeah, what was that like in the beginning? Was that terribly challenging for you when you were first getting going and didn't really have that energy? I'm sure it got easier over time.
Yeah, yeah. And my cervical myopathy took about 2 years to fully heal. So like at, when I first started, I started just trying to make the dietary changes and just moving more and stuff like that. It wasn't until probably a year later that I added in the intermittent fasting. And when I did added the intermittent fasting, I was like, this is pretty wild because like my friend had told me about intermittent fasting and I was like, so I looked into it and I was like, oh, it might be able to help me with my endometriosis because endometriosis is a highly inflammatory disorder and stuff like that. And what it really can help with inflammation and whatnot. And I didn't know at that time that also eating low carb, low sugar would be just as powerful. But because like at that time, I didn't know what metabolic therapies were and stuff like that. I didn't know how a ketogenic diet is a powerful, powerful anti-inflammatory diet that can reset your body. I did not know that. So like I was doing these things and I didn't know I was doing them. And so like in 23, I had a hysterectomy and I removed my gallbladder. I wasn't quite as low carb yet. That didn't come until 24. But I had those surgeries and stuff. And what happened was I reached my goal weight right around then. And so like I eased up on the intermittent fasting and I didn't, it was not good because the low carb, low sugar diet was also low fat. And so I reached my goal weight. I didn't have the body fat to turn into ketones. So I started having problems because I didn't know that these tools were in fact helping improve my schizophrenia, but they were because when I stopped them, I relapsed.
Mm, yeah.
And so then I sought then I told my after being upped my medication and stuff like that, all the way up to the highest dose of antipsychotic that I was on. They upped it to 80 milligrams. I'd never been on that. It didn't take away my symptoms. And I was in an inpatient facility voluntarily. And then I got released. The meds didn't work. And I did an outpatient program and, nothing was helping. And I got back from the outpatient program and I said to my husband, I really think that the intermittent fasting played a role in me getting better because like my symptoms went away for the first time ever. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I think that's a powerful intervention because I've heard it can be very good for inflammatory conditions. And I knew there was a neuroinflammatory component. So I was like trying to piece together what the heck just happened, why did I relapse? And so we went searching on YouTube. We found a Metabolic Mind video featuring Dr. Chris Palmer and him talking about his brain energy theory. And so I was in ketosis. My sodium levels were off. My electrolytes were off because I didn't know a low carb diet, you might need some more sodium in your diet. You might, so like I had the electrolyte disturbances that backed up the fact that I was in ketosis. And that was what was improving my schizophrenia while improving my physical health. And so like I then sought out Denise Potter's team and got started trying to incorporate like the high fat keto diet because when you're at your goal weight and there isn't all this bodily fat to lose, you need to start introducing fatty foods so that you could still replicate the same benefits of what was happening when you had all the extra weight on your body.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I want to go back to that video, and maybe I'm over glamorizing this, so you can tell me what your experience was like. But what I'm noticing is there's a person in front of me who suffered with mental and physical issues for a lot of years. You have intuitively figured out that cutting out sugar, keeping carbohydrates low is probably better. You start doing intermittent fasting. You notice that that's helping a lot. These are all like intuitive things that you start doing. You loosen up on the diet. You bring things back in. Symptoms come back and you start suffering again. So you think to yourself, okay, well, I maybe should go back to intermittent fasting. Then you stumble upon this video of this incredibly smart and crazy kind person who is so knowledgeable and also cares so deeply about this topic. He wrote a book about it, Brain Energy. You watch this video with Chris Palmer. What is it like for you to watch this video, see this person explaining everything, like exactly what was going on that you had maybe had a hunch about or discovered, and now this guy is telling you this is exactly why? What was that like?
It was validating because I was like, oh, so this is why I improved. And I was relieved to know that other people have actually gone through this and there was science behind it, and that this guy wrote a book about it because he saw the benefits in his own patients. And I was like, I knew when I saw that video, I was like, it makes sense. Now I know what happened to me. I didn't know what I was doing, so hence the relapse when I loosened up everything, and it just it felt good to know that there's real science behind it. I'm thankful that Metabolic Mind puts forth all this effort to show people that there's better options out there and that they don't need to suffer if they're suffering on the psychiatric drugs like me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm heading this weekend to the COSI conference in Las Vegas that Dave Feldman hosts, and the Bazuki family will be there. And just to be able to go up to them and tell them once again what an impact they and their family has made in this space to get this information out there, to fund studies and provide grants and all the amazing work that they do that's changed so many lives. It's really cool to hear how grateful you are to them and their information. And yeah, the amazing change they've made in such a short amount of time is absolutely staggering. And to know that more and more stories like yours will come out and will continue to inspire other people is just absolutely incredible. It sounds like, again, you were reducing your sugar and carbohydrates. Now you're learning about this whole new thing, which is related, right? Like you see and hear about keto, and it's great for weight loss, and that's fun, and that's wonderful. We like that. But now there's like metabolic psychiatry, and this is like a whole new level. This is like, some people like yourself need to measure ketones. You need to really watch your blood glucose. That needs to be a lot more stable. What was it like to take that next step into a much more kind of serious, no fooling around type of a ketogenic therapeutic diet?
It was really beneficial. Like, I work with my family doctor, I work with my dietitian, and I work with my psychiatrist. I need all three of them on board because I need my family doctor to run labs and stuff like that, just to make sure I'm doing everything right, and remaining healthy. But I need my dietitian the most, probably because I was low carb and low sugar, but I had no idea of like what types of fats and things I needed to be making and what kinds of products to be buying and stuff like that, and how to balance my diet and how much fat should I eat in a day and stuff like that. Like, I had no idea what a fat bomb was, and that is something everyone should know because, like, especially like as I'm eating, I'll be eating like a meal and I'm wearing my CGM, and I look down, I'm like, oh, this isn't balanced enough because my glucose is starting to elevate. And if my glucose elevates, and it'll drop my ketones, and then I'll have symptoms of my schizophrenia. And that's how sensitive I am. So, like, a fat bomb would come into play, and or like a spoonful of coconut oil or just some fats, just I need to have that much fat in my meal, in every meal, otherwise I will have symptoms. So like the dietitian is very beneficial.
Yeah.
Because that's where I learned about fat bombs.
Yeah, good. What about the psychiatrist? Did the psychiatrist you're working with, were they open to this intervention, like using nutrition to this level?
Well, in 21, when I told my doctor that I dropped the meds and stuff, I was previously doing just phone visits, because of COVID, and I just didn't want to go out of the house because like I was pretty much a homebody and I never ventured out or did much of anything. So when I reduced my medicine for the first time down from 60 to 40 milligrams, I went to my psychiatrist in 22, the beginning of 22. And she's like, what are you doing differently? She's like, she could see visibly with her own eyes that there was a marketable change in me. And she was like, what are you doing differently? And I was like, a lot, because like I started doing metabolic therapies and I didn't know what they were. So like, I told her like a little bit of the things I was doing. I was trying to watch my inflammation, eat, get rid of the junk food, move more and stuff like that. But I had no idea that there was such a name for it called metabolic therapies, And so I was like, I'm doing a lot actually, and then we continued to go down on my dosage, and she was she's supportive. She kind of defers to me now because she knows that I've kind of researched this and taken charge of my health. And so she basically has told me, what do you need from me? What dosage of prescription or strength do you need for me to write you as I'm tapering down? But she doesn't understand it. So I gave her the book, that the change your diet, change your mind book, so that hopefully she could understand some of the science behind what I'm doing.
I understand it might, take a lot of resistance for somebody that's trained as a medical professional and they're only now hearing about this. Like that might be difficult, hard to accept, maybe difficult for the ego to really comprehend that like this is something that people are doing that's really fixing a lot of problems, and it's not something that's taught in school. And so I hope it is seeds that you are planting, and this person might, remember you and remember your story and see other people struggling and wonder if this could be applied more evenly to other people. Because I'm kind of like you, like once you start seeing this kind of thing, it's really hard to unsee it, and it's really hard to shut up about it. Like you don't want to be quiet about it. You want to go share it with everybody. And so yeah, it's great that the psychiatrist was supportive and is realizing that you can kind of take control of the situation. I just hope eventually, the information you've given her, that wonderful book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, is absolutely fantastic. Dr. Georgia Ede is incredible. Hopefully, that maybe changes the way she practices, and rather than impact one life, it impacts, 100 lives of people she works with. So hopefully that does change over time.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope she applies it into her practice, because I mean, she was perplexed in 22. She's like, what are you doing differently? Why are we able to reduce your meds? It's been 13 years. We haven't successfully been able to do that without bringing about psychosis and symptoms. Like, why is it different this time? So I think that sparked some curiosity in her, and hopefully she takes the CME courses from Palmer and Georgia, and just listens to that and learns more about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I would hope so too. As part of the preparation for this interview, I listened to an interview that you gave. I want to say it was sometime around the summer of 2024. Wonderful to hear your story and where you were at that point. And obviously, our stories are constantly evolving. We're always changing. And I remember you were asked about your diet at the time. I had a few thoughts. It sounded like your diet was very, very clean. And you mentioned a few things that I wondered, like, I'm wondering if she's still kind of eating some of those things. So you mentioned like you were really loving a lot of different vegetables, a lot of broccoli, a lot of spinach. I think you said there were other things that were in there that I just from being in the carnivore space for a while, it seems like those tend to kind of get phased out a little bit. And so offline, I asked you how things had kind of changed and evolved in your own diet. And you kind of gave us an update. Can you tell us where your diet is now versus where it was like partially through the year last year?
Yeah, like when I initially started, I was more uh, low carb, like probably like 18 net carbs a day, and that included some low carb veggies and stuff, and nuts and stuff, and seeds. Recently, though, I was advised that I should maybe even eliminate those to see if the anti-nutrients from those foods were inhibiting the iron absorption, because my ferritin was always really, really low. And it's come up considerably since I've done this.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And low iron can um, uh, bring on psychosis too. So like, and I periodically would struggle with really low iron. I would get dark circles under my eyes, paleness, sore tongue, all the symptoms. And maybe it's the anti-nutrients from the plants and stuff.
It sounds bananas. It sounds absolutely insane that that would be what it is. And like we're told that like spinach has so much iron, kale has so much iron. It's like, well, it's not really in the best form for humans. It can actually block the iron that we're getting from other sources. And so it's interesting. Like I said, I've been in the carnivore space for almost 6 years now. And when I see people kind of moving into low carb, it doesn't seem like it's very long that whether they decide to do strict carnivore or not is not really that important. But they find that a lot of the plant foods they thought were amazing for their health were actually not the very best. I think initially it's nice because I know that if somebody's eating broccoli, for example, spinach, for example, like nobody know that I know of just eats broccoli. They eat broccoli cooked in a ton of butter and maybe some like bacon or bacon grease or something. When they eat spinach, it's with hopefully a bunch of olive oil and it's with maybe an avocado in a salad or something. So I know it's at least a vehicle for like more fat and salt and something that somebody would really want to get in the diet. So I don't mind. But yeah, it's interesting to think about like maybe there are some components in some plants that just build up over time that they might be better eliminated as far as the inflammation goes. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah. I found I found that like when I first started in 21, or 20, that to reduce my carbs and sugars, like the further and further I went along and the stricter I got with my diet, the more and more benefits I kept seeing and the more improvements in my physical and mental health. So like, it's always best to gradually um, ease into this, because it can be quite the shock for your body if you just go, hey, I'm gonna eat 3 net carbs today.
Yeah,
that
totally.
that shouldn't happen. That you should gradually reduce.
Yeah, I agree. That's already such a low number. And yeah, what would I be able to say to somebody who was you last year doing this podcast and saying like you love broccoli and spinach? Like, well, I'm not going to make a big fuss out of that for somebody like you. If it's something you love and enjoy, it's great. It's in the back of my mind that, yeah, I wonder if you'll improve a little bit more by diminishing that kind of thing. But it's interesting to take that journey. And like you said, like if you take a good step, it's repaying you. You're going to feel better. You're going to want to continue doing the things that make you feel really good. And so you can just take another step and take another step and see where that lands you, which is another good segue into your life and lifestyle and all the amazing things that you do and you posting all the pictures. How has it been to recover your physical health and really discover the joys of not only running a little bit, but walking? You do an amazing amount of walking. Like tell us about the life transforming, kind of power that comes with walking.
Walking is like a zone 2 exercise. So you go into, I believe it is fat burning. So that's probably really good, because that's probably why, like, I don't know if you've seen my post about my ketone readings and how, like, I thought I broke the meter once. the Keto Mojo reader, because like my ketones were reading high. I had to look it up. It meant like over 7 or 8.0 ketones. And like, I see like all these carnivores, like, and people in that are also using metabolic therapies for their own health or physical or mental health. And like, I'm like, they're like, goodness gracious, like what kind of reading is that? Like how do you get that high of a reading and stuff like that? And I don't know, like it just it's just, I don't think there's like really a correlation between a really high reading and improvements on my mental health though. Like I think my sweet spot is if I'm at least like 2.5, maybe to like 5, but like anything above and above that, I don't really see that increased ketones means it's going to improve my mental health more. Oftentimes when my readings are that high, my stomach feels a little crampy and it just doesn't feel as good physically.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. I'm glad you brought up the fat burning zone, and you're absolutely right. So this is what I did for my entire career: is used a metabolic analyzer to determine where somebody's kind of peak like fat burning was. And luckily, there's a really good formula. You don't need to get any kind of fancy testing or anything, but just for the listener who's listening to this, there's a really easy formula that you can remember, which is 180. Take 180 minus your age, and that will give you a target heart rate that's like a maximum heart rate for the best fat burning. And you really want to stay there or below, which is nice now because most people have smartwatches, which have heart rate monitors built into them. So if they want to know exactly what you were talking about as far as like a maximum fat burning, they could start by just making that simple calculation. If I'm 41 years old, and so I can say, okay, it's about 139 for me in my heart rate. And if I stay there or below, I am maximizing my fat burn. I will burn more calories if I work out harder, but those calories come from sugar. They don't come nearly as much from fat. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, and you're absolutely right with what you're saying about the fat burning zone. So yeah, it's such a wonderful activity, and to get out in the sunshine and be able to move and in the outdoors is just wonderful. So I'm glad you make that an example as well. Have you had your cholesterol checked since you have been eating in this certain way?
I just had labs come back yesterday. So, yeah. And, I was really surprised because, like, I'll eat like a stick of butter a day. Like, like I eat like a lot of freaking fat to like balance my meals so that my glucose doesn't elevate. And like my labs came back good. I was really surprised because I thought, oh goodness, I'm sure my doctor is going to yell at me going, your therapeutic diet's going to kill you. I could just kind of see him. So like, thankfully I didn't have to have that conversation with him.
That's good.
But again, I have a really good doctor that I'm blessed with because like I switched doctors in 2020 because I wasn't feeling like I was improving with my current care team, my current primary care doctor. So I switched doctors. And when I went to him, like a lot of my before pictures looked like what I post online. I was 273 pounds. I could barely stand. And so like at this last appointment where he ran all these labs for me, he was like, he basically says, I'll run whatever labs you want, because like, obviously what you're doing is working for you, and he respects what I've been able to accomplish.
It's great. That's so great to hear. I love that. I mentioned the conference that I'll be heading to that's hosted by Dave Feldman. He obviously does a lot of research with cholesterol. And this is the second time they're doing the conference. The first time was last year. And it wasn't immediately obvious to me that so many people were there because they wanted to learn about cholesterol, but it was also a lot of people in the metabolic psychiatry space because they were the ones who needed really very strict kind of ketogenic diets, which then sent their LDL cholesterol really, really high and created the triad that we now call a lean mass hyperresponder, where somebody is experiencing incredible benefits. Their triglycerides are very low, which is good. Their HDL cholesterol goes up, which is good, but their LDL cholesterol can go sky high. You kind of, to me, would have fit the profile of maybe somebody who would have been pretty darn close to being a lean mass hyper responder. We do also know that like your LDL can fluctuate quite a bit. So depending on what you did, the day or two before you got that blood draw could have influenced that number. I'm just curious if it had come back. Let's say your LDL, what we call the bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, came back 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the recommended amount. To you, from what you know and how good you feel, would that have been a major area of concern? Or would you have said, you know what, that is what it is, and I feel great, and I'm willing to have that number be as high as it is?
Knowing what I know about how those numbers have changed over the years and how much the drug companies have in influencing healthcare and stuff like that, I don't think I would be very concerned. And plus, you got to look at it from my perspective. The option is what for me? I only have the ketogenic diet as my only option. I'm not like every other mentally unwell person. My meds no longer treat my schizophrenia. I would be a raving mad lunatic that couldn't formulate a coherent thought or sentence or write a paragraph. I would be useless. I would be absolutely useless. And that's not, to me, an option that I'm going to consider going off my diet for, when I doubt the legitimacy of those numbers
Well
as
said.
being an indicator for heart disease or heart attack.
Yeah, well said. I don't envy people who are in that position, because you have to make some critical decisions. And I think most of us in this space are fairly confident in saying what we think we know about cholesterol is probably wrong anyway, but it's still uncomfortable to think about. And it's funny to contemplate that, but also know that anybody I've ever asked that question to has said almost exactly the same thing that you said, that like I'm not going back. I don't want to miss one more minute of my family and my ability to experience life is so much better now. And to realize, like, we've been talking for over an hour now, you've been completely alert and able to have a wonderful conversation. To think that that might not ever happen, you might not be out there like helping people, is quite interesting to kind of comprehend. But I want to close just by asking you the question, again, you were in a spot where I think you could have given up. A lot of people probably do give up, but you just, for whatever reason, said, I'm going to do something. And it started with some exercise and the fasting, reducing carbohydrate, all the things that you have done. To somebody who is in that place where maybe they're just hearing about you for the first time and they're in a really dark, deep hole and not knowing if they can even make progress, if it's even worth it, what would you want that person to know?
Well, the changes that I made took many years, and everyone's got to start somewhere. And sometimes it's just going to the grocery store while you're full so you don't get tempted to buy the bad things, or just maybe, just moving more, just small steps, like I think that, those are the stepping stones to bigger steps you can take. And sometimes it's just those little things that inch you forward.
I love that. What a great way to close this conversation. I have so much respect for you, and I'm so grateful that we were able to meet on Twitter or X or whatever we want to call it, and that you post your happy, smiling pictures of you doing physical things every single day. It's just awesome to see, and it will help a lot of people. So I know it's not the easiest to talk about, but I really appreciate the courage that it takes to discuss and come on our show and other shows as well and try to get your message out there as much as possible. It's pretty cool. So for now, Harmony, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
You can find me on X. I do sometimes post a little bit on Instagram, but I think my diary is pretty much on X, and I post my successes, my failures, things I'm learning, because like we're all constantly learning and trying to be better. Sometimes I post on TikTok too, but mainly it's X.
Excellent. Cool. We'll be sure to link that up in the show notes. And yeah, like I said, you've got such a wonderful and inspiring story, and the desire to get out there and help other people with that same thing, I think is really pretty admirable. So Harmony, thank you so very much for everything that you've gone through, and thank you for sticking with it as far as the treatments go, and to be able to come out the other side and share your story has been really helpful. So thank you so very much for everything you do. And thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Okay, thanks, Casey. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it was such an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.